Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Collaboration for Programming. I'm the moderator, Kevin, and let's go and have the panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mohamed E. I am the current software robot lead on Search Circuits. I'm going into my 5th year of FRC with 1678, and I was the Citrus Service Programmer in 2020.
Hello, everyone. My name is Apurva M. I'm a 4th-year veteran member of 1678. I was also a secondary Citrus Service Programmer in 2020, and I had led new programmer training this offseason.
Hi, y'all. The 2021 season is going to be my 3rd season at FRC. I'm the current software director for Team 254, the Cheesy Poofs. Outside of robotics, I like doing math, physics. I also play some League.
Hello, like I said earlier, I'm Kevin Rockwell. I'm the moderator. This is going to be my 2nd season on 1678. I'm back-end leadership on software scouting, and outside of robotics, I do a lot of D&D, cross-country when we aren't in the middle of a pandemic, and general programming projects. So going into the general outline of the panel, we have it kind of split up into 4 general topics. So first we're going to talk about team bonding, then we're going to talk about sub-team collaboration and logistics, so that's a little bit more general organizational matters. Then we're going to go talk about code practices and other stuff just related not quite to the organizational matters, but more specifically to how each team goes about writing the code. And then finally, we'll discuss things that we found that are mainly specific to meeting online and over the web. But all of these the things we discuss should be applicable to virtual collaboration. So let's go into team bonding. So just starting off, how do the panelists, how have you guys done team bonding with your teams?
So on Citrus Circuits, we've had team bonding inside our sub-team and then outside our sub-team. I'll start off with inside our sub-team. So the first thing that we did 2 sessions of team bonding when COVID first happened with all the veterans. And then I think about 2 months ago, we had a bunch of new members join us. We did a 2nd session of team bonding. In each of the sessions, we had different activities just to get to know each other. We had different icebreakers. In the 2nd session of the veteran training, I think we played Jackbox games. So just like getting everyone to like break the ice, getting everyone comfortable with each other. That's the main thing that we tried to do on sub-team bonding. I think Apurva can take on team bonding and smaller groups of that.
Yeah, I mean, just like Mohammed said, right? We did a lot of small activities, especially when our new programmers came on, to get everybody familiar, right? I think something really important for collaboration and programming in general is getting comfortable with the other programmers, right? Being able to ask questions, asking for help, getting to know everybody, so you can just communicate better overall. And so that was like a huge focus of ours when we, first were introduced to a lot of the new programmers that we took on this year. Especially being in a virtual environment, it becomes more important to have such team bonding, right? Just to, make the situation a bit more light, get everybody comfortable with each other. And overall, I think, that's really important also just before going into training and everything, right? Because if you're doing new programmer training, you want to make sure that your new programmers are willing to ask for questions even outside of a meeting session, so they can get the help they need. So having something like team bonding to kind of like pave the way for all the other interactions to happen on the sub team become really important.
Alex, how does 254 go about doing that, both on a sub-team level and a team-wide level?
Yeah, so we didn't really do any team bonding like after the season kind of abruptly ended or in spring, I guess. But like for fall, we've had a lot of team bonding activities, I guess, with the new members. So what we do is we basically split into like kind of like breakout rooms, maybe like 10 people in a room, with both new members and for veterans. And with like each breakout group just decides on what they want to do, like play maybe like Scribble or like play Among Us or something, some game or something. Yeah, so it's pretty great for getting to know like new members and like veterans. Pretty good for getting new members integrated. We've also done some team workshops where we like again we split into rooms. So that's pretty cool. It encourages collaboration. We haven't really done much for sub-team team bonding, but yeah, that's what we've done for like whole team bonding.
How effective do you guys think that team bonding is as a way of building collaboration? And especially if you didn't used to do it, have you noticed any gains in doing it this year? Or does it mainly just counteract the challenges put in place by having to work remotely?
So, kind of reaching out of, just the sub team itself for a moment. Something that, like 1678 as a team did this year was we had like team bonding groups that, connected people from different sub teams together, right? So that they could meet virtually. And, like something like that becomes really important because especially in these times, interaction with other people is a lot more minimal, right? We have social distancing, we have quarantine, etc. And so having that sort of opportunity to get to know others better, right? And get to know them, especially outside of, just a work setting, right? In which there might be, some stress or, different things to worry about. It becomes really important and frankly enjoyable, right? To be able to just, have a fun activity like that over which you guys can get to know each other better. So I think overall team bonding can be really effective for just becoming more comfortable with the team members you have to work with, because in the end collaboration is how we're going to get things done. And so making sure you can have that step one to get everybody on terms with each other is a pretty, I would say, effective thing for our team as a whole and our sub team.
For
does
us,
anyone else have any?
oh yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. I guess I'll just kind of talk about it. So on our team, I don't think team bonding is or virtual team bonding, I guess, is that effective. It's definitely effective to some degree, right? Because it is good to familiarize yourself with new members, to integrate new members into your team. But I feel like the virtual aspect kind of degrades from the effectiveness or detracts from its effectiveness. We used to do like a lot of members used it to like in our lab before builds and before meetings and that kind of stuff. So I feel like that was more effective, where we were just talking about random stuff compared to like this team bonding stuff, because a lot of the time we're just playing games, not really getting to know each other. So that's just my 2 cents on how we do it. But yeah.
Kind of going off of that, I definitely get the sense that it does seem a little bit more forced trying to do that sort of thing remotely than it does other ways. Have any of you encountered ways to make it seem a little more natural and less just like we're going to go and try and push people together to make them talk?
I remember a few weeks ago, we had a team meeting, and I think one of the new members asked a question. The question was just like talking about like how difficult it was for them to like learn Java. They were learning Java at the time, and then everyone just pitched in like, oh yeah, hey, like when you started as well, like it was really hard. And then like the meeting kind of like didn't go as it was really the plan. There was supposed to be like a lesson that day, but there wasn't. And then we just had like a whole discussion about like imposter syndrome and like how hard it's to like get started into programming. So that was like honestly like a really natural team bonding event that happened. It wasn't really planned out, but I see that as one of the peak team bonding events that happened over the COVID season. As for like everything else that's like kind of like forced, it's kind of hard to make it seem natural, especially since like you don't really know anyone in your group. Unless you're a veteran with another veteran, you usually don't know who else is in your group. So yeah, like it does seem kind of forced, but like the scenario I described earlier, that seemed like natural. It was natural, and I think that was probably the most effective team bonding that happened on Software Robots.
Yeah, I mean, I think like just to answer the question like directly as well, right? Building off of what Mohammed said, I just think that relatability and like stressing relatability between members is really important for making things seem more natural. In the end, the way Mohammed described, right? In that situation, we had all gone through a similar issue with having difficulty understanding code and getting started with writing code when we first started on our sub team, right? And that's a situation that lots of people can relate to. So, just finding those common places, right, in discussion and just talking naturally about it, I think becomes really important, right? Because, the more you can relate to somebody, the more you realize, you guys are similar, or you guys can at least understand each other's perspectives, and then get closer to them in reality by understanding them a bit better. So, like, I guess that sort of discussion breaches beyond, like doing a simple game of Among Us or, some other activity, and can be really helpful for team bonding.
Does anyone else have any other thoughts on team bonding, or should we go on to the next topic? Alrighty.
I say we can.
Right, so the next topic is sub-team collaboration and logistics. So we do have a poll associated with this, so if people in the chat would like to open that up, in a couple minutes we're going to put up the poll question as we get to the topic of discussion. So let's just start off with some pretty basic questions. So how many people are on the sub-teams for both 1678 and 254?
As of right now, I think we have 12 members on Software Robots.
Yeah, this year we had a lot more freshmen than usual, so we have maybe 12 to 14 total members on software, but in previous years we've had like 6 or 7 usually.
Is the current number about normal, Mohamed or Apurva?
On sister circuits, that number is pretty normal.
Okay.
Yeah, usually it's around 12 members around this time of year.
And do you expect it to go down as we get later in the season, especially going into build, or does it normally stay about the same?
Going into build, I think we lose maybe 1 member, maybe 2. But it's pretty rare to like lose members as you go on, especially like in November. Like all the members you lose are generally like early on, like September, maybe October. So I think the numbers probably stay the same until the end of the year.
Alex?
Yeah, so obviously like this year we've had, or maybe not obviously, but this year we've had a lot more freshmen join. And I guess since we have such a larger number, I anticipate that it'll go down because what usually happens is a lot of freshmen will join to see if they can kind of like balance robotics and sports or speech or whatever else that they're doing. And as the year progresses, usually more and more people will drop, right? They'll say they'll figure out that they don't have time to do all this stuff and schoolwork. But I think that the virtual environment, or like the online nature of most extracurriculars, I guess, I think that allows for a lot more time, because especially in robotics, we're spending a lot less time in the lab because we're just doing workshops and stuff, and that usually takes less time. So I think that once we get to the point where we're going back to the lab, I think a lot more people are going to drop. But I hope they all stay. It's good to have a lot of people.
Yeah, so going off of having more people, how do you manage distributing work and distributing various tasks among larger groups of people, especially when some people have less experience than others?
So something that like 1670 as a whole follows, and our software sub team also follows, is something called the peer-to-peer model, where we basically have veteran members and new members kind of like pair up with each other and partner up and work together to solve through problems or to learn new concepts, etc. And I think that by using that model, or in general encouraging collaboration in that way, right, is really helpful for making sure that everybody gets something to do and that everybody has a legitimate task that they can work on, right? It's really beneficial to both parties, right, both the veteran member and a new programmer, because a new member gets to learn code, right, by seeing examples and working through it on their own with some guidance of somebody who might have more experience on the topic. And at the same time, as a veteran member, you get a lot more experience with skills such as like teaching, right? And through teaching, you obviously learn a lot more as well. And so using that to kind of pair up students, right, and work together in that way to work through difficult concepts can be really important. I know that as we go into our competition season, we use this model a lot when we get started with our subsystem code, because that's code that we want to make sure we have multiple like hands-on to make sure that we're not missing a certain part, right, and that we're incorporating the best like aspects we can into that subsystem. But having a veteran member and a new member paired up to kind of collaborate to do that work can be really effective, because both people learn while they're writing code, and you have like strong task delegation in that way, and you can know that your subsystem is going to be finished on time.
Alex, how does 254 manage delegating, especially with the sudden jump in the amount of newer members?
Yeah, I don't think I can talk too much about like our 2020 robot and that kind of stuff, but I can kind of give a timeline of what happens basically. So usually in fall, right, we have a bunch of new members join. They usually go through workshops all throughout like the fall semester or fall, winter, or whatever. And so when build season comes, usually like these newer members will be working on I guess less advanced or less complex mechanisms and stuff. So they'll be working on vision and stuff. So these will usually be smaller teams. These projects will be worked on by like smaller teams of like a couple freshmen or a couple newer members, and then usually more experienced members like veterans. They'll be working on like more complex like state machines, subsystem architecture, that kind of stuff. But they will be available to help. And then after build season ends in summer, Team 254 at least is fortunate enough to be able to work on a summer project, or we have been fortunate enough to work on a summer project for the last couple seasons or the last couple of years. So usually around that time is the time that a lot of freshmen can take bigger roles in writing more software, more complex stuff, and just playing around with like autonomous and those kinds of things. And then once they're sophomores and they get to the next build season, they'll be able to take on bigger roles.
Okay, yeah. So now we're going to go into the first poll question, and question also this is directed for the presenters. So what language do you use? And for the presenters, can you give us some insight into the reasoning why you use it?
I can start. So we use Java on 254, and I guess we've been using Java for a while, but one of the bigger reasons we're still using Java is because it's the same language that like APCS is taught in AP Computer Science. So a lot of students who want to join the team, want to join the software, they'll likely have some APCS experience. Or when they go on to like sophomore, junior years, they'll take APCS and they'll get even more like insight into how the language operates. So it's a C course, or C++ course. So it's pretty nice to be able to kind of integrate, or to be able to use like classes taught in school to kind of help our sub team members develop.
In 1678, we used Java. I think we've been using it for 1.5 years now. We transferred to Java because we wanted our team to be more sustainable. C++ was really hard to teach, and a lot of people didn't really understand it fully. So when we transitioned to Java, more people were able to understand like how the code worked. It's also like you don't have to like deal with memory at all, which is pretty nice, which takes a lot of the complexity that C++ had. So the transition to Java was something that our team underwent for the 2020 season, which started in the 2019 offseason.
Okay, cool. So we're now going to we're going to leave the poll up for a little bit longer, just so more people can get in. But we're going to pivot the discussion over to working with version control and how the teams do version control. So yeah, so first off, what version control software do you use and how do you use it to collaborate?
On Citrus Circuits, we use GitHub. We don't use it just on the software robot team. We also use it on software scouting. On software robot, we use Git and GitHub. So how our code is managed is we have one master repo. That's the only repo that people pull from if they want the most recent code. And then if anything gets merged into master, it has to go through a pull request process. That pull request process requires at least two veteran reviews and approval from the sub-team lead to merge into the code base. We use PRs mainly because lets everyone on the team like see what's happening in the code. Any changes that happen are reviewed by almost every member of the sub-team. Usually people don't have tasks to do at sub portions of build season, so they can just review pull requests. It also helps keep our code uniform. So we have a salad guide that we follow. If the salad guide is broken in the pull request and the original person who wrote it didn't notice it, someone else can be like, "Oh yeah, hey, you name a constant by putting a k before the variable name," stuff like that. In addition to the two veteran PR approvals, you also need to pass a build kite. We use a continuous integration in our GitHub. If it fails the build kite for any reason, it cannot get merged unless it's forced merged by the sub-team lead. This basically lets us make sure that the code that's getting merged into the master branch is always running and always compiling. This saves us headaches in the future. Like if someone merged code that doesn't work, it'll just break the code base for everyone else because everyone's pulling from master constantly. I think that's everything that has to do with source control on Citrus Circuits.
Alex, I think 254 uses a different method than the than the fork PR system that GitHub we use. So, can you walk us through how you do it and what the review process is like?
Yeah. So we basically just have like a master repository. Oh, we use GitHub, and then we'll have like a master GitHub repository. Or we'll have like one repository for each season's code, and then we'll have different branches, I guess, for different projects. So all the work is done on these different projects in like the official like the season repo. When we're merging branches, we sometimes use PRs. More frequently, we'll just copy paste code. That's pretty nice, especially because we've had like smaller software subteams in the past. So it's pretty easy to keep everyone like updated on what's going on, and it's faster. But if we do use pull requests, they usually have to be reviewed by like a senior software person or like a mentor. So. Kevin, I think you're muted.
I know how this works. Yeah, so I think that's it for the collaboration and logistics. So now we're going to get into the bulkier parts of the presentation. I think we're starting off with code practices. Essentially this is going to be talking more about how you go about the process of writing code, tests, and documentation. So we're going to start it off with a question from the chat, actually, which is, how would you recommend a team get started using test-driven development? So I think we should actually start by asking, does either team use test-driven development?
Citrus Circuits uses test-driven development. We don't use it on everything, but we use it for anything complicated, like a state machine or autos. We have some auto tests that we use that come. Also, we use JUnit. So we write JUnit tests for Java.
Yeah, we're pretty similar. We have unit tests and such as well.
Alrighty. So if you're a team looking into using more tests, how would you recommend doing that? Should they just start by focusing on improving test coverage, or should they maybe start by just doing tests for all the new code and then any changes they make?
I guess if you're starting with already written code, you should probably write tests, especially for all the stuff that has a lot of math in it. Yeah, I guess if you're starting from the ground up, you should probably just write tests as you go for more complicated pieces of software.
Yeah, and how do you handle when you need to unit test stuff? Do you test everything? Do you drop tests if you're running out of time and just need to get something done? What's the processes like for tests?
On Citrus Circuits, tests are generally written. We try to, so during build season, we try to have it at the start, but due to the time shortage, it usually ends up getting done after our first regional when people don't really have much to do. We try our best to have it be done, as we go, but that doesn't always happen because of time, how much time it takes to write a test, make sure it's written well. In terms of what actually gets a test written for it, subsystem code generally doesn't, since subsystem code doesn't have that much of complicated logic. State machines might have tests for them, or anything with complicated math, as Alex mentioned before.
Yeah, so we usually have tests written for more complicated stuff before it's merged into master. The code is put into master. So that's usually done before the final code is put in master, I guess.
Okay. And how do you go about integrating code into what you already have? So if you're adding a new mechanism, for example, how do you go about testing that it's being added correctly and that it's not going to break anything?
Generally, before people make a pull request, they have to do a bring up. Bring ups are done with a veteran. There has to be a veteran there. More oftentimes than not, it's very rare that the subteam lead won't be there, but the subteam lead will be at every bring up. Sometimes it's not always possible. The bring up process is really important. You gotta make sure you test as many cases as you can. You gotta do just some number of tests to make sure it runs properly. For example, if you have a wrist, you want to go the full degrees of rotation, maybe 50 times to make sure it doesn't break. Make sure your code doesn't break itself. You try to test with low battery voltage. You try to test sensors. Make sure oh yeah, what happens in this case? Does my code cover every single case possible that the robot would encounter in an actual match? And then once that's done, it gets put in a pull request and then usually merged. this is pretty good because you've already tested most of everything, and then if any other changes that need to get made are usually found during driver practice or during just later on in the season during actual matches or something. And those little changes can be done like really fast and really easily. Yeah, that's basically it for bring up.
Yeah, we do pretty similar stuff for bring up. The important thing is to just run like your code, test a lot of different test cases, I guess. We'll usually like require there to be a mentor, like supervising, both for like safety and to like help if something goes wrong. So, yeah.
Okay. Going into general code practices, we've already discussed language, and how do you handle keeping a consistent style guide throughout the code base?
So I mean, I think like a large part of maintaining consistency comes through like our peer reviews and pull requests before code is merged, right? Something that we really stress on 1678 is making sure that all the code is uniform, because that increases readability. It makes it a lot easier to refer back to code, etc. And so usually, if there's any inconsistencies within, the style that we use, the code styling that we use, then that will be commented within a pull request, right? We require both, as Mohamed mentioned, new members and veteran members, as many as we can, to review those PRs. So we usually catch, code styling, but I think throughout the team, because it's stressed so much, it becomes like an easy practice as well, right? In which way to style, your member variables versus certain methods, etc. Your constants. So yeah, I mean, I think overall it's really important to have that code styling in there, because it makes your code a lot more readable, especially in a case where you have a lot of difficult or more complicated logic going on, right? Being able to assess an error, right, or understand exactly where each variable within your code is, right? Going back to the idea of tracing code in general to catch errors. And yeah, I think overall, because of that, code styling gets really important. And so by reviewing that a lot in PRs, you can manage to make sure your code is uniform that way. Well,
Yeah, when we're pretty good about like stylizing constants and member variables correctly, because those are pretty easy, right? You just add a K or an M. But for I guess other stuff, like local variables within like loops, within methods, all those kinds of things, we're not too good about that. Like our code's readable, but not everything is like stylized the same way. So we're working on that. But I think it's more important to have your code be readable first, and then maybe you can focus on like make a more narrow like style guide to kind of further sync everything, I guess.
How do you ensure that readability then? Is that something done in the review process? Do you just kind of trust everyone to get it right? How does that, the readability come through?
Yeah, that's usually done during like when we're merging branches to master or something. We'll usually do like a review then. Those kinds of reviews, we have to make sure that like all the logic is sound. Every line of code, I guess, has a purpose. Like everything's readable and understandable. That's pretty helpful, because when you have someone like from outside who hasn't really been working on your code, looking at your code and seeing if it like makes sense, I guess that's like the biggest indicator of readability, right? Whether someone completely new can look at your code and understand what's going on. So yeah, but for smaller stuff, we'll have like some people will just make smaller like cleanup commits, cleanup changes. But that's all the big stuff usually is caught in review.
yeah, I mean, I think like that kind of lends to the whole idea of code documentation, right? That's something that our sub team is, like beginning to do a lot more, because it's a really important part, right? It helps new programmers especially understand the way code is written, right? It helps everybody understand the logic and different functionalities of the code that you're actually merging in, right? And so a lot of the time we make sure that documentation is added where it's necessary, through somebody asking questions about different parts of the code, right? Like if you're confused about a certain part of the code when you are reviewing it, right, then you add a question there, and whoever is the author of that code answers their question, but they also add documentation, right, to make sure it's clear to anybody else. And so yeah, that sort of thing gets added throughout when you're working on your code before it's merged.
Yeah, speaking of documentation, I know this was addressed partially in the software architecture panel, but Alex, how does 254 ensure that they're getting good documentation and that's actually useful?
I think we generally have a bigger problem with like under documentation than over documentation. Yeah, usually documentation will be added before the review process. Another big time where we do a lot of documentation, I guess, is before we do public releases of code. Yeah, but in general, if you're confused about something that's going on in code, you can usually ask someone during the season, and they'll be able to tell you. It's obviously not ideal. It's another thing we need to work on, but it hasn't been like a super big issue yet in build season. So.
Okay, yeah. How has the for everyone? How has the review process kind of changed now that you're doing it remotely? And how much actual robot code can you write during this time with the absence of a robot to test on?
So starting off when the pandemic first hit, it was end of build season. There wasn't really any code to write. So up until I think the summer, we had a little summer project that we did for like an off-season bot that was never going to get built, but it was just practice for all the veterans to just kind of get used to like writing code, because a lot of these veterans were new members back in January, and since the season was over, they're not considered veterans. So it's kind of their first like big on project where they each like had they managed it by themselves, they wrote the code by themselves. And then we kept the same pull request review process. We opened up a brand new repo as if it's like a brand new robot. It was kind of like a simulation, basically, of what an off-season robot would kind of be like. Sort of how things have changed because of COVID. I wouldn't say our pull request process got changed at all, but some of our lessons now, the first lesson that we taught about pull requests, we kind of did a group pull request on an old PR. Because that old PR had a lot of like changes that needs to get made to it. So we hopped on that together. We just screen shared on Zoom, and then people were like, oh yeah, hey, this is wrong. This line of code wouldn't work. This naming is just wrong. This styling is wrong. You need documentation here. Stuff like that. Just a lot of collaboration online. I think that really helped teach everyone, like how to make good pull request comments. How to make a good like pull request, like what to make sure you have before you start your pull request, stuff like that. So I think it's the only change that's happened due to the pandemic and online circumstances.
Alex, what about for you?
Yeah, I don't think I can really talk about the extent to which we've done like robot code and stuff. Especially this off season. Sorry about that. But I do think it's more helpful to be in person when doing when reviewing like pull requests and those kinds of things. But I think it's definitely doable online.
Mohamed, you spent some time talking about good pull request comments. What goes into that?
Like commenting on a PR or comments like from the author or from a reviewer? There's two sides to that. I can talk about both. Yeah. Okay, so the author, they create a pull request. Their title should be descriptive. It should just say like, oh yeah, write elevator code. I don't know. And then from that, you want to have like little bullet points that they're as descriptive as possible for everything you do in the pull request. For example, set talent IDs to the proper ID number, tune the PID for it. I don't know, stuff like that. Just as maybe descriptive bullet points in your pull request, like the first block that comes with the pull request. And then for a reviewer, a good comment should be should just tell them like, oh yeah, hey. It should like sort of ask them, not point it out. It shouldn't be like a direct change. Like it shouldn't be change this to that. It should be, shouldn't this be that? It's just constructive criticism. It's not necessarily like bossy in any way. Another thing that comes with that is that the comments don't necessarily have to be changes. They can just be general questions like, hey, why is there an eye gain here and not in some other subsystem? Like, why does the shooter have an eye gain? Stuff like that. And then that helps veterans, new members, just everyone on the team like learn, because someone else could have had the same question, or just if you're the one with the question, you still learn from it. Like, yeah.
Alrighty. Does anyone have any other commentary on code practices, or if there are any other people watching, do you have any more questions about that? Okay. We're going to move into the last segment of the presentation, which is meeting over the web. Oops. Okay, so this is going to be focused a lot more around the grittier details of how you logistically implement the remote meetings. We're going to have a couple more poll questions associated with this. So stay tuned for those. Other than that, yeah. So we're going to start it off with how do you communicate? This is also a poll question, so yeah. So Apurva, how does 1678 communicate online?
So almost like all of 1678's communication is done through Slack, right? We outside of meetings, right, we still have reminders and assignments and any like timelines or guidelines communicated throughout Slack, right? Either in DMs if somebody has a more personal question, or on a Slack channel for the entire sub team. Something really important about communicating over Slack that I think was really good that we implemented throughout our competition season. Actually, Mohamed, started doing was, having an update for the changes made in that week, or on a specific day if there were a lot of important changes to be made, just to update the entire sub team on what's going on, right? And what are future things to work on, or what are tasks that we accomplished this week, right? That just keeps up everybody in the loop, everybody up to date with what's going on. And so being able to use Slack as that service to make sure that everybody is in the loop and understands what the sub team is working on right now, what its current objectives are, or even what its future objectives are going to be, like looking forward. That can be really useful for better understanding how we should go about things on a sub team, and making sure that if anybody has any concerns, we can address them immediately.
Yeah, so for like text communications, we used to use Mattermost in the past. Now we use Slack. So if you don't know, Mattermost is pretty similar to Slack, except it's self-hosted. So that like allows for a lot more freedoms with like messages and like image size, like total amount of images uploaded and stuff. But we switched to Slack we switched back to Slack this season because it's the image features are pretty nice, and like both Slack and Mattermost have pretty good features for like different channels, for talking to everyone in one channel, all those things. And then for meeting software, we use Microsoft Teams because our school uses Microsoft Teams, so they kind of want us to keep like all the communications on some school platform. Yeah, so we use Microsoft Teams exclusively for meetings, and Slack for regular text communications.
Have you encountered any issues for anyone? Any issues with people doing too much important communication in DMs or places where it isn't visible, so you can't get a shared knowledge transfer between more people?
So, a lot of the time, if people have questions, right, on the sub team, then they'd prefer to ask it, like on their own, right, in a DM to, anybody who's leading the training or may have presented that lesson that day, right? So something we do to kind of counteract this, right, because we want to make sure that everybody can be more confident and involved with the entire sub team, so the entire sub team can gain knowledge. Something that we do is that we, suppose you present a lesson, then afterwards you provide, whatever material you presented in that meeting. And then you ask everybody to, thread questions in the channel, right? As, you could say as sort of an assignment, right? But it's really just, if you had any questions, please make sure to, thread them here. And that way, we can respond to them immediately on the channel and everybody can, learn from whatever questions those are. Because I think Mohammed mentioned this earlier, but overall, there's always going to be a question that multiple people have, right? And so it's just a matter of getting it asked so all those people can learn. And yeah, being able to do that on like a public channel, right, is then a lot more useful, right? Because you're not dependent on everybody DMing on their own. One person can do it and everybody can still.
How often do teams meet? Both as a full team meeting and also if you meet separately as a sub team.
So we have whole team meetings once a week. We also have some like whole team, like team bonding activities or like workshops or something. So sometimes that number will be more than once a week. As for sub teams, usually sub teams will meet. New members will have like meetings, maybe, or like new member specific meetings will occur maybe once a week for us, and then or just once a week, yeah. And then veteran specific meetings will happen also like once a week. So, yeah.
And then there is also a poll for that question, if we could get that up there. How often does 1678 meet?
1678 meets as a general team twice a week. They're pretty short meetings. They range from like 5 to 15, maybe 20 minutes sometimes. And after that meeting's over, we transition to sub-team meetings. We meet on Wednesdays and Thursdays, but we might not necessarily meet on both days. Sometimes we might choose to just meet one of the 2 days. It's a pretty good format, especially earlier in the season when we still had the new members. They're doing their own curriculum outside of software robot and software scouting. So we just split that up into like 1 day for veterans, 1 day for new members of the Wednesday and Thursday meetings. And that's a pretty good system, and it's still holding up pretty well because people can just schedule extra meetings if they need to as well, like over the weekend. So generally, yeah, we meet twice a week as a general team, and then at least once a week as a sub team.
Yeah. So I know that both of the teams have mentioned that you use virtual meetings. I think Alex said Microsoft Teams, and I know 1678 uses Zoom. So what do you do in these remote meetings?
So, most recently, like in our meetings, we've been doing a lot of like training for new members and veteran members. For new members, we've actually been going over Java in recent weeks, right? Making sure that they understand that because, so on 1678, we actually have everybody learn Python as a preliminary step in like a software general kind of group. and then they can either move to software scouting or software robots. So on software robot, you finally make the comparisons between Python and Java, right, and introduce the new members to how Java works and how they can code in Java. And then the next step of training is actually making sure that those programmers can get in more hands-on training with the work that we actually do on our sub-team, right? So understanding how subsystem code is written, understanding what PID is, right? Even understanding, what are ways you can write an autonomous, things like that get really important to be familiar with before competition season, right? Obviously, right now, one of the larger difficulties is, getting everybody to actually write substantial real code, right? But there's a lot of, projects or, code assignments that you can give to help encourage people to actually try out on their own, right? And write code and practice. I think, something cool that, we just recently introduced is that we're having our veteran members try rewriting previous code that was written in C++ into Java, right? To be able to practice their, skills, right? And be prepared for competition. So, that's a cool thing that we've been doing. And, you'll go over any material or any questions, etc., at meetings, right? To address concerns like that.
Yeah, a good amount of our workshops or our meetings are workshops as well. So we have like different, I guess, like learning tracks or curriculums, I guess, for new members and for veterans. So new members will generally be doing stuff from like Java, learning Java, learning like how to use version control, up to stuff like state machines. And then for more senior members, for advanced students, we'll have stuff like more advanced control theory, like EKF, Ramsat, peer pursuit, spline general, that kind of stuff. It's yeah, that's generally what we do in meetings.
Okay. And then, so what does your, so two questions on this. What does your normal timeline look like? And what does your timeline look like for this year?
Like build season timeline?
Just kind of throughout the year. So from when you say from off season going into build season.
So during a normal year, actually no, during both years, I think we follow the same timeline. We have the new members first join. They learn Python with software scouting kids, and they split off generally around the same time. This year we split off a little bit earlier because we started the training of the summer, which was an advantage of being online. But then they continued training up until the first day of build season, and then from there we just try subsystem code up until robot code up until champs. So it's about the same timeline. Just we got new members for the two sub teams a little bit earlier than usual.
In terms of like more specifics of the content we actually go over, a lot of the time, so we spend, like, at least this year we've spent about a month going over what Java is, right? We're hoping in the next month or so until like the beginning of competition season to go over more sub-team specific code, right? And then in competition season itself, right, you have a lot of subsystem code written like as soon as possible, right, within that first month and stuff. And then after that you go into working on the different more gritty aspects of your robot, right, throughout competition season. Yeah.
And then in the off season, I'm assuming you have slightly different timelines for new members and veteran members. Could you walk us through the differences?
Well, I think the biggest difference just comes through the training that is actually provided, right? Something that we went over this about the peer-to-peer model, but a lot of veteran members are actually involved within our training, right? Because we want to make sure that they have the chance to pass down the knowledge they have, right, and obviously get a learning experience out of it themselves. But while new programmers are learning Java and then learning to write more sub-team specific code, veteran members on their own might be doing different projects, right, that we assign. So For example, rewriting previous code that was in C++ into Java is a project that our veteran members are now doing, right? Because that's a bit more difficult, right? And we want to make sure that they're adequately prepared. So yeah, I think for veteran members, it's really just a series of projects and different learning opportunities that you can get on more specific parts of programming a robot, right? Like vision, for example, that we may go over.
Alex?
Yeah, so like I said before, we have kind of different curriculum for new members and I guess veterans. When we were actually able to work on the robot like last offseason, the 2019 offseason, generally what would happen is we would have like a new member workshop maybe like once a week, while like the veterans would go work on something to do with like the summer project or something. And then and then for this season, if we were to meet in person, the idea would be pretty similar, except this season we also have like advanced member workshops or veteran workshops. So generally, like new members would be going to work on other projects, while like the advanced members had, or the veterans had, like a workshop.
Alrighty. As we're starting to run out of time here, does anyone have any closing thoughts on just in general how teams can improve the virtual experience?
I would just say in general, if anybody has, any questions about the workshop that they'd like to ask right now, please feel free to do so. But as kind of like my closing thought, I would just say that, these are definitely more difficult times, right? Everybody has a lot more reduced interaction between sub-team members and et cetera. But I think keeping up with communication, right, and just making sure you have something to do, right, even if it isn't, actually getting to work with a real off-season robot, right, even if it's still doing training or working on separate projects, being able to communicate and work through things together in that way, collaborate on something, is really important, and can make sure that you're still passing down knowledge, right? You're still creating a sustainable, a sustainable system for your sub team, and it also helps keep morale a bit higher. These are rough times, but we'll definitely all get through it. We just need to keep it up and hope for the best.
Yeah. Unless anyone else has anything, I think that just about wraps it up. So thank you all for coming. Thank everyone for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe. Good luck in whatever happens later.
Yeah, thank you again for moderating.